In about 10 seconds, I can say good afternoon, but we are going to get started on time. And I just want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you for being here. It's a good day. It's Halloween, which is interesting because this topic of education is something that has been kind of scary for a lot of folks to talk about, especially this issue of equity. So I think it's fitting. And so let me introduce myself. My name is Frank Whitfield. I'm the president and CEO of the Lorain County Urban League, just about 30 miles west of here. And this conversation today is going to be about urban education and moving the focus from equality to equity. And as you can see from the visual we have here, we wanted to kind of find some sort of imagery. I know you've seen a lot of these images whether it's young people trying to look over a fence and things, but the conversation of equality being give every individual the same thing to the shift to giving every individual what they need. And so this image really reflects that that sort of thinking. We're going to talk about what that means in terms of education. But before we get started, I do want to thank our host, the City Club, and thank Dan, and also the wait staff here. Let's give the wait staff and Dan and his team here a hand. Doing a great job. And I wanted Dan to come up and give us just a welcome and some remarks about education. He gets a chance to see a lot of conversations in here on education. So I wanted him to, get us kick started here and give us a boost of energy. So please welcome Dan.
Okay. How much time do you want to take? 5 minutes. Okay. Hi, everybody. It is great to see you. Hello, Merle. How are you? I feel like I know a bunch of you pretty well, and I'm really glad that we're able to host and provide a venue for this important conversation. I want to start out by apologizing in advance if I tear up or anything like that. It's been just like, can we all just acknowledge what a week it's been? It's just I don't know what's going on in our country right now. And yesterday I was, we just did this project to create 3 new murals, all about freedom of speech. This mural over here is called Freedom of Speech and was painted in 1942 by Elmer Brown, who also did a lot of acting and art and set design at Karamu House, African American, trained in that WPA style. And 2 of his murals also hang over at CSU in the ballroom. And some folks, some City Club members and community members challenged us to invite the community to reinterpret the notion of freedom of speech. And yesterday, there are now 3 new murals. There's one at Playhouse Square on the side of the Bonfoy Gallery that you've probably seen. And there's one on the side of the Harvey Rice branch of the Cleveland Public Library that you can see as you drive down Shaker Boulevard. It's most easily visible as you're heading west towards the city. And that one's by Donald Black and replaced the other mural that had been up there, also by Donald Black. And then we put one up at Collinwood High School in partnership with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And that one, the one at Playhouse Square is it's very graphic. There's words all over it and words from our creed, the creed of the City Club. The one at the Harvey Rice branch is just an image, a single image of a young African American male with a microphone and a shattered window. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's beautiful. And the one at the school has lots of different people in it. And it has these 3 words, dialogue, diversity, democracy. Dialogue, diversity, and democracy. And yesterday we were invited, Noelle Celeste, my colleague, and I were invited to speak to faculty at a faculty meeting at Collinwood High School to just give them a little context, because schools are these kinds of places where some brand new thing could happen. A mural could go up and the faculty doesn't know anything about it, right? Because schools are complex places, and teachers are busy. They're preparing lesson plans and grading assessments and all of that sort of thing. And so we went over to talk to them a little bit about it. And before we went to talk to them, I've been looking at these murals, really familiar with all the artwork. And this one in particular was one that I'd paid a lot of attention to. It wasn't actually my favorite of the three. But a lot of other people really who were involved in the selection process really loved it, and it's part of the reason why we went with three instead of just a single mural. We found we had three submissions that were so good that we couldn't not do all of them, so we had to raise some more money to do all of them. And we pulled out. If you go out to Collinwood High School and you pull into the parking lot, you see it. If you get off the bus at Collinwood High School, you see it. It's right there. It's on the side of that building that's sort of the parking deck and all of that. And it's facing this street level lot, this surface lot that they use for orientation for the families at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the next school year, when these new families come, they will be greeted underneath this mural, Dialogue, Diversity, Democracy. And I was very familiar with this piece, and I hadn't seen it at scale. And I got out of my car in front of it, and I looked up at it, and I was overwhelmed. Because there are so many, there's just so many things coming together. Now, part of it I was overwhelmed because of this horrible week that we've had in the midst of a horrible year or two or three in which our politics has gotten vitriolic, in which bigotry and forces that would stand against equity have gained so much strength. But also I was reminded that fundamentally the work of schools is the work of democracy. And the successful work of schools is the foundation of a strong democracy. And that was the feeling, the sort of coming together of all of those sentiments was what I was feeling so strongly yesterday. I used to teach high school in California. Many of you know that. Before I taught high school in California, I taught in a county jail in California, and it was the work in the county jail that kind of led me to teaching high school. And I don't know how I don't remember how I articulated what was motivating me at the time. But when I look back, I am certain that it was this drive toward equity, towards providing young people who, through no fault of their own, find themselves challenged, find themselves really facing adverse conditions, finding themselves woefully underprepared for participating in our communities, for participating in democracy. And it's the little things. There's this policy level at which we're having a conversation today. But ultimately, as Merle knows well, it's what happens in that relationship between a teacher and a student that creates the opportunity that we're talking about. I had a student, her name was Kristen Gray, and she, I didn't know this until years later. It's like the only good thing about Facebook is that you wind up getting reconnected with these people from your past, and and on occasion you'll get a note that indicates the kind of impact that you had, which was the impact you always intended to have, but you didn't know that you were having it or not. Teachers especially almost never know what kind of impact they're having. She reached out to me to tell me that I was the reason that she went to college, which was then the reason why she's now working with youth in San Francisco. I taught in a troubled urban school district in the East Bay, just south of Oakland, California, a place called San Lorenzo. And if you know that stretch of California off 880, it's East Llewellyn Boulevard, and it's a small unincorporated place in California with a really struggling school district, 2 high schools, and what it has going for it is great teachers. And I was fortunate to be surrounded by them. I had great colleagues there. And it's the kind of school, too, where students there's no cafeteria because schools, like, why would you, I don't know. There's no cafeteria, right? But there was a Taco Bell on campus, go figure. And the kids used to get their lunch and often would eat in my classroom. And I would, and this young woman, Kristen Gray, she was a student of mine in my American literature class. And then in her early senior year, she was having lunch in my room, and I said, "Did you get your application in for Cal State Hayward?" And I don't remember this. She told me all about this. Apparently I said that to her, and she said, "No, I was just working on it." Well, she didn't have a plan to apply to college. She wasn't planning on going to college. That wasn't part of her thing. But because I treated her in this way that assumed that she was capable, which was the way I'd always treated her, that assumed that this was something that she not only could strive for, but ought to strive for because she would be successful at. She went and applied, and then she got in, and then she went to college, and all of that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that you never know. The teachers and these teachers who are doing this work, it's so vitally important. And with teachers, you never know what the impact will be. And ultimately, with education, we never know what the impact will be. We are placing a massive bet. Whenever we do this work, we're placing a bet on a better future for all of us. And it is in all of our self-interest that we do this. But it is mostly in the interest of the future and future generations. So this thing that we're doing, striving towards a more equitable, a truly equitable, not just equal, but equitable future in education, is absolutely worth it. And sometimes it feels so hard. But I want to thank all of you for doing the work. This is the work of our grand experiment of a better America. And I thank you for doing it. The City Club is a partner in this work. I hope you feel that in the conversations that we bring here. I hope you all feel always welcome here. One of the challenges, just to go back to the mural for a second, Mark Joseph very pointedly has noted several times that you come in here and it's all about, we talk about equity, we talk about equality, and we talk about dismantling systemic racism, and you look at that mural and you're like, man, that is a lot of white people. Yes, right? Yeah, I know. Just I'll tell you, just so you know, I've had trouble with it too. I think Elmer Brown painted himself right in the middle of it. And the last document in that whole stream of documents coming out of 10 Commandments is the Emancipation Proclamation. So I think he was being a little subversive, helpfully subversive. But nevertheless, those murals that we commissioned are definitely a response to the lack of diversity represented there. But I do want to say, I hope you all always feel welcome here. This is your city's club. This is your club. This is what we do. There's no topic that has driven us more than education over the years. Although I would say second to that in these last few years has been equity writ large, racial equity. So as you all prepare to take on these big issues, to untangle this Gordian knot, know that we are at your side. And if you have thoughts about conversations that you think ought to happen, we want to help you make them happen here. So thank you very much. It's a privilege to be with you all today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Dan. And so, as you can see, when we thought about having this conversation, we thought there was no better place to have this conversation than the City Club, not only because of the hospitality, but just the tradition here, what this conversation represents. And so I just want to acknowledge a few folks, or really, I want to acknowledge everyone in the room and kind of put some context to who we have here. So we have some elected officials in the room. We have some school board members in the room. I saw a school board member earlier. We have some newly appointed Academic Distress Commission member in the room. We have some community volunteers, foundation representatives, nonprofit representatives, and of course, Urban League CEO. So I'm going to ask my Urban League CEOs to stand so I can introduce them to you all. And I'll start over here with Miss Diane Stevens Robinson, of the President and CEO of the Canton Urban League. So I want to recognize her. Marsha Maccabee, President and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Urban League. Tom Conley of the Urban League of Youngstown Warren. And Dr. Sadie Winlock of the Akron Urban League. So to get things started, Marsha's going to come up and share some context for this conversation today, just kind of ground us in where this, what's motivating us from a national standpoint. And then we really want to dig into some conversation amongst the folks here, because I think there's a lot of richness in this room, and I always think the answers are amongst us. So Marsha's going to set some context here, and then I'll come up and facilitate. I pride myself on my facilitation skills, so hopefully I do a good job and we get the most out of everything in here. So thank you, Marsha.
So I'm going to start with a lesson on equity versus equality. So Frank stood at the podium. I'm standing at the podium. We both have the ability to stand at the podium and talk, okay? That's equality. We both have equal access to the podium. But you could see Frank much better than you can see me. And equity input would be something that I think Dan's about to get from me. Right on time. And I love you, my brother. I'm praying for you, okay? Okay, all right. So right on time. Okay, so now I have received an equity input that allows me to perform, okay, at a similar level as my colleagues. So therefore, equity. Okay, so there we go. That's my equity lesson for the day. So I'm really, really, really happy to be here. And thank you to each of you who came to join us today. I have a question for you, and I think there's a real advantage to this soft launch that we're doing today, because we really do have an intimate group here. So I want to ask you a question. How many of you feel that the state of urban education, particularly in our area, in Northeast Ohio, even in our state, is at a very serious juncture? Let me see your hands. Okay, so we got the temperature of the room, Frank. We're all pretty much on the same page there. And here's what I say as I go around doing the work that we're doing. That I believe that if children were dying from a disease at the level that children are dying educationally, every system in this country would come to a screeching halt to find a solution. And so I take seriously, as an Urban League leader, the role that we need to play to begin to help convene the community, because you see, for far too long, this has been an issue that has been pointed to schools and schools only to fix. In urban education today, especially in many of our poor school districts socioeconomically, there are so many issues that impact children's ability to learn that we have to come together as a community to change that game. And so we're here today to have a soft launch of a program called No Ceilings on Success. We're tired of any ceilings on success for our students, and we're going to work on that. We're going to change the game on that, and we're going to talk about how can we do that together as a community. So we've asked some of our best and brightest leaders here to be with us today, so that you can help us to plan what that ought to look like. You can help inform us as to what that needs to look like. Now, as we go forward, just a little bit of context. Frank Whitfield from Lorain County and Tom Conley and I have already been involved for a couple of years now. Tom and I a few years, or Frank and I and Tom joined us recently, where we're working with school districts, the State Board of Education, and other community leaders to start talking about how do we create equity in the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, I think most everybody in this room, from the vantage point at which you serve as a leader, you already know that the difference in the Every Student Succeeds Act, it specifically calls out equity as a key cornerstone for what has to happen in community engagement around ESSA. It also gives more power to the states. No Child Left Behind and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act started as more of a top-down kind of approach. Well, Every Student Succeeds Act creates more intervention at the state level. So you have all that going on. And Frank and I have been working with our state. And let me just take a minute to give a shout out to Paulo Di Maria. He has been very engaged with us on our Wallace team. We've been working for 2 years, he and his team, and we have seen some real movement in terms of working with districts, working with us, and really calling on us to help move the equity lens. And so I want to just, in their absence, they weren't able to be here to join us today, but I just want to give him a shout out and give that team a shout out for the wonderful work that they've done. So let me give you a little bit of vision. We believe that with urban leagues, school districts, school boards, community, faith-based organization, community leaders, that we can begin to stand up a model that says enough is enough in our communities, and we are going to come together to find solutions to help change the game for our young people. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, you know that at the bottom of the pyramid, there is basic needs being met, right? Survival. And for those of us that work in some of these school districts, we know many of our students are dealing at a survival level. We have record numbers of children who are playing parental roles at home. We have record numbers of children who are coming to school hungry, going home hungry, in spite of the programs that we have to give them food and what have you, but there's still issues. What we know is that the top of Maslow's hierarchy is something called self-actualization. And that's the place where we begin to understand things like the Pythagorean theory. We understand calculus, we understand AP history, and the like. So for children that are at the bottom of the pyramid and can't get past survival, how do we expect them to reach a point where they can really be self-actualized in an academic environment? So I believe that what our responsibility is as the village is that we, in fact, have to begin to put out a call, put out an agenda, put out a movement that creates a big tent to gather all comers and all equity ambassadors to help in this movement. You're our first wave, so I'm deputizing you today to be our first wave of equity ambassadors. Do I have anybody in the room that's up for that today? Here? Okay, very good, very good. So at this point, and Frank, help me, we're going to go to the PowerPoint. Okay, so my challenge, I can see it from here, very good. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to share with you is there are about 88 Urban League affiliates across the state of Ohio, and we have 5 of us represented here today. In the state of Ohio, we have more affiliates in the state of Ohio than any other state. So we have a good team of Urban League affiliates here. We're connected to the mission of the National Urban League in that there is an I Am Empowered agenda. There are multiple goals for various strategies of the National Urban League implementation. The one we're going to sink in on today is the goal that's around education. So the I Am Empowered goal around education says that by 2025, every American child is ready, that's a key word, ready for college, work, and life. So we're locking down that conversation about, are they going to college? Are they going to work? That's not our conversation. Our job is to make sure they're ready, whichever one they want to do. Okay, so that's going to be our conversation, and that's going to be our movement, okay? And so everything you hear is going to be kind of aligned with that. Now, you're going to also hear us talk about equity and excellence in education. I'm going to say that again. Equity and excellence. We're not going to have a whole lot of debate about whether it is public education or private education or charter schools. What I say is, wherever a child that the Urban League represents sits, I want them to have a quality education. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So in the Equity and Excellence Program, which is a national program that comes from the National Urban League, there are actually 7 areas of focus. What you see on this list, though, are starred items which represent the areas that the Northeast Ohio program is going to focus on, okay, as a beginning point. Eventually we'll get to others, but as a beginning point, these are the ones that we're going to get to. And let me just take a minute. I think I should back up to understand, to explain, because I didn't do this in the beginning. There's going to be 2 parts to today's meeting. One is this overall broad presentation, and then there's going to be a dig in where our affiliate CEO groups and people that they've helped to convene today, after this big presentation, we're going to go to work to decide, now what are we going to do next? And how are we going to organize ourselves to really create this momentum that we need to create this movement? So that's really how we're organized to get our work done today. And for all of those that want to stay with us for the second part, you're more than welcome. I know some of you have been asked to be a part of that, but anybody else that wants to stay and can, you're welcome to be a part of that, because we need your brain power and we need your input. So let me stop for a minute. Are there any questions about these 7 focus areas and the ones that are starred? Okay, seeing none, we'll keep it moving. We talked about ESSA, yes. Now, the No Ceilings on Success, can we go back to that one, Frank? The one before that, okay, is a national campaign that has been launched by the National Urban League so that we have common language and common materials that can address the kind of movement and the kind of campaign that we're trying to do. This campaign is about achieving educational equity under the ESSA banner. And we have many partners. Now, there is a No Ceilings on Success website that has lots of information. And I think what we can do, Gabby, where? Okay, Gabrielle is our intern from Cleveland State on the Urban League team. I think what we want to do is work with Ms. Sharon when we get back, and we put this up on our website so that you all can go to the website and download it so that you can have access to get to this, okay? Does that work for everybody? Okay, very good. Okay. Yes, we can do that too, yes. Okay, so you see what we've done today is we've done our first wave in this soft launch of bringing together state and local stakeholders. So we have superintendents here, we have state legislators here, we have parents and families. We don't have students here today because we couldn't work that out quickly enough. But we have community-based organization leaders and higher education folks. So we have a beginning real good cross-section of folks to help us think about this and help us organize this. And I will say that in the work that Frank and I have done, and Stanley has also been a part of that, and Sharon Brown from our Wallace team, and Tom Conley, we already are working with Warrensville School District, Maple Heights School District, really deep with Cleveland, Metropolitan School District. And we have our newest superintendent here from Euclid who joined us today. So we're glad to have him. And those are all in my catchment area in Cuyahoga County, so I'm really proud. And of course, we have, Frank's been working with the folks in Lorain, and Tom's been working with the folks in Warren and Youngstown. So, and you'll hear from others that our other affiliate CEOs are doing in their areas as well. So one of the things that we hope to bring in for our foundation partners that are here today, so you kind of know what we're up to too, we're looking at bringing three major things into this arena. Our thought leadership. As Urban League leaders, we want to be viewed as those that bring thought leadership to the table on both state and district level education work. We want to engage people by doing stakeholder meetings, parent engagement and trainings. I did a training actually on Monday, and I did an engagement event over at Case Western Reserve. So one of my students who was in the social work event that I did yesterday on the life of, I was so honored to do a session on the life of Congressman Louis Stokes, and to honor him and to kind of talk about his legacy. And we engaged in a discussion about where we are today versus where we are when he talked about right after the election of President Barack Obama, where the country was in having its first African-American president. And we said some of the things he said, he talked about how far the country had moved and how we had a big discussion about that's not where we are right now. So one of the students was excited, and she joined us today, so we're really glad to have you. So then finally, advocacy and communications. You see at your table, you have the little black book that we gave you. That's part of the No Ceilings on Success media toolkit that comes from the National Urban League. They do a great job in providing us materials and so forth. And for those of you that, I'll give you a little incentive, a little teaser here. For those of you that decide to stay for session 2, you see this nice little pin here that says No Ceilings on Success. We have one of those for each of you that stay for session 2. So we're excited about those opportunities. Okay, so thank you. And let me just stop and see if there's any questions before any comments, questions, response. Talk to me. Yes, Murrah.
I was quickly looking at your first slide where it had the areas you're going to be focusing on.
Yes.
It was the very first one you put up.
Okay, we'll get back to it for you. The EAP areas of focus, yes. Mm-hmm.
And one that I don't see, I mentioned to you before that I brought copies of the state's
Yes.
strategic plan.
Right, we're going to do that in session 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing, the committee that I was on was the Student Support Committee.
Yes.
And I'm just looking, and I don't see anything that really focuses on providing the kinds of supports for students that they need, and possibly can come through other areas, but I was trying to see if there was an area where that would,
Check.
So thank you, Merle, for that. I
Check,
think we're
check,
going to be
check,
addressing that under equity and excellence at scale.
All right,
What
check,
is it going to
check,
take to
check,
get equity and excellence at scale? That's one of the pillars that we need to build. But that's the very thing that when we deal in session 2, we need you all to help us start thinking through. How do we really build that model for what we need? It's good.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Others, because I think that was really important. Because when we get these, the guidance from National Urban League, we're always trying to figure out how do we localize this? How does it make sense on a local level? So that was really good feedback. So other questions, thoughts, comments before we break into these table conversations? All right, well, we're going to start some table dialogue here. So on your table, you should have a list of questions, prompting questions. We're going to spend, and I asked y'all to stay here till 1:30. Is that still okay? Okay, so then we can put the time in. We're going to spend about a half hour until 1 o'clock discussing these questions and any other questions you may want to ask, but I'll just walk through the format of this. So you'll first go around the table, you'll introduce yourself and what equity means to you. share a story, a equity story. So we heard Marsha's story earlier of equity, where it happened to just pan out that way, where it was she got the equal treatment, but it wasn't equitable treatment. So share one of your stories about of where you're aware of that. And then, have you ever had access? What has it been like when you've had access to all the resources you've needed? How have you and the people you love been impacted by the education system? So really, let's have some conversation about the system as a whole. Why is civil rights legislation like every Student Success Act important? So why is this act important to you? And then we'll talk about some next steps. And when that last, make sure you get to this number 7, because we really want to make sure we talk about action out of this. How do we mobilize out of this conversation to some action? So really, the purpose of this, and I may have to mix y'all up, because I noticed y'all sat with people y'all came with, which I asked you not to do. So yeah, I'm going to ask you all to please stand up. Y'all got new people. Look at y'all. Y'all trying to hold it down. No, don't mess our table up. All right. Let's see. If you two could join these two over here. Oh, you coming up here? Okay. And you two right here, if you could join, Superintendent, if y'all two could, you come into this one. Oh, good. You come in here. All right. I'm going to let y'all self-police then. I don't have to do all that. All right. So go ahead, y'all. Start the table dialogue. I'll come around and make sure, and just, we'll report out at 1 o'clock.